Okay. And we have a couple of viewers already, so this is good. I think that it takes about 30 seconds for it to propagate. But one thing that we could start with, of course, would be introductions. And on the screen, the way I see it is I have, hold on, I'm listening to my own voice now. I have to mute it. I'm
What's
watching the
the,
YouTube channel. Sorry,
what's
go
the
ahead.
name of your page?
It's Empowered Trans Woman Summit.
Okay, on YouTube.
Yes, and if you do see the video playing, keep in mind that if it comes to the speakers, it will be a little disruptive, so maybe headphones will work. But anyway, going from left to right, we have Carmerion and then Diamond and then Vanessa and then myself. So well, let's start with introductions. So Carmerion, would you do the honors?
Absolutely. So my name is Carmarian D. Anderson. I am living in Texas. I'm in Austin. And a little bit about me is one, I am the honored and privileged executive director of Black Trans Women, Inc. In addition, I have a background in public health and I'm also clergy. Some fun facts about me is that I have a twin brother who's identical to me, so you got to know he's very handsome. I am a mother of a son who's almost 22, and I actually have a grandson, my precious baby, and he's 2.5. So I'll just stop there, but I'm very excited to be on this panel to offer whatever I can from my own personal and learned experience to the audience.
Welcome, Carmarion. And Diamond, go ahead.
Hey, well, I am the host of a great podcast called Marsha's Plate. I started my activism on YouTube as a vlogger, and they started this amazing Black trans, and I'm a part of that group with Black Trans Women's Inc. Oh my God, I am the host and one of the co-founders of TransFitCon with my husband, Neo Sanja. I am things, and Black, authentically Black trans woman, and that is what I center my politics around. I think that's who I am.
Wonderful. And Vanessa?
I'm Vanessa Ross. I am originally from Indianapolis. I've been living in Houston for 8 years, and I am a student right now. I am working on my degree in creative writing, and I've been involved in the LGBT community for quite some time. I work for outreach for a youth group and suicide prevention. And I'm just really excited to have an organic conversation and share my point of views.
Wonderful. And my name is Cassie Brider. I'm the host of the Empowered Trans Woman Summit. And a little bit about me, I'm the webmistress of a website called sexpositiveworld.com. And that's a website which is, it serves a community of sexologists and generally sex positive people, which means it's an umbrella of the LGBT and the polyamorous and the monogamous. And we talk a lot about relationships, and we talk a lot about privilege and social justice and issues like this. And I've been in that setting for about 3 years, which is where I kind of found my voice. I kind of had this vision that as I transition, I'm going to have to perforce shut down and I'm not going to get much of a platform because I had such internalized transphobia, you guys wouldn't believe. So it took me a while to gain more and more confidence, but I've been leading workshops for women primarily for quite a while. And then the idea came to me earlier this year about putting together this online conference. It's shockingly going really well. It's probably going to kill me before it ends, but it's going really well. And I'm really happy to have the opportunity to bring a platform to voices that I think are really important. And one of the things that I found is that there are aspects of the trans experience that need to be highlighted more, or need to be communicated more urgently to the mainstream and to the population at large. And one of those was the subject of trans women of color. So I'm really happy that I'm very appreciative that you ladies have joined me on this panel. Wow, that was a lot. Okay. So I'd like to start at that point, and it's sort of kind of because I have a tendency to poke the bear, and if there's an elephant in the room, I want to point it out. And one of the things that I wanted to say is that I went out seeking trans women that would be of prominence and that would be in a position to inspire and to talk to other trans women for the summit. And I found that I immediately connected with, especially with ex-military trans women, because right now that's kind of a heated topic. So Bryn Tannehill stood up, and Monica Helm stood up, and Kathy Serino stood up. And then I found, through my contacts in LA and through the LGBT Center, I found, and through my Hispanic contacts, I found a few more gals. And then after that, I maybe had about 20 or more people that came through transgender groups and stuff like that. And I assembled a panel which seemed pretty robust. But then in looking at this panel, one thing was very, very obvious to me, which is there was a whole bunch of white trans women. There were a few Hispanic trans women, most of them whom I knew personally. And there was a friend of mine who's an Asian trans woman. I didn't have any black panelists, and I felt that I had gone wrong, and I felt I had done something bad. And I did a much more more earnest search for you gals, and I basically almost gave up on that. And I surfaced a few people that I didn't feel would be good spokespeople and good representatives, and then eventually it led me to this. What do you think is at the root of the fact that even when a platform presents itself, such as this one, it is harder to get the people of color? And I don't know, maybe there's just a perception, or maybe, again, this is, I'm speaking about a sample of one, but what would make people of color more reluctant to join such a platform?
Well, I don't know if it would be reluctant. I think a lot of these platforms that are made by people that aren't of color, so they don't do outreach to the communities, and then they don't notice that they're not outreaching to minority communities. So it's just like an ingrained thing that people just don't recognize, that they're not inviting people of color until people of color say, hey, we're here too. So when those things are being formed, those platforms, those councils, those those meetings about how to serve a trans community at large, a focus needs to be put in the beginning on also trans communities of color. And so it just needs to be some kind of collaboration between the trans community and the trans community of color that I don't think that has been pointed out yet. Mm-hmm. Focused in on, sorry.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You have to be intentional. You're from the beginning. Like when you are trying to be inclusive, it has to start from the beginning of your project. When I'm a retail store manager as a that's where I make the bulk of my money. So when this particular month, we're about to go into a holiday. So in my mind, I have to number of people. So I have to decide who I am going to give a chance to come work at my particular store. So when I decided that this is the number of people who I want is intentional. I want some Spanish speakers. So I'm going to look for some Latina people who can speak Spanish. There was a trans woman who came in, and I was intentional about hiring her without disclosing myself until later. so she could feel comfortable. And I was intentional in discussing how how she wanted to interact with my staff. Like, do you want me to prepare them for you because she doesn't have a name change? She has some things that will trigger their minds, and I'm like, I'm intentionally asking her, how does she want me to handle it? I'm hiring Asians, I'm hiring white girls, I'm hiring multiple people, and so that I can have a diverse group, because one of our core values of my company is inclusion makes us better. So if your intention is beginning to be, then it's not.
You're breaking up a little bit. You broke up a little bit there at the end. I think we might have lost Diamond.
Me?
I heard up to inclusionary, and then that's where we lost you. I think you made a wonderful point, but we lost the very trailing end of it. Carmarian, do you have anything to add to this?
Yes. I like what both panelists are saying. You know, one is speaking on an approach of outreach, and the other panelist is speaking about, you know, when you're providing an invite, to be intentional. You know, from my experience is that no African American, no Black person, we're speaking about people of color, but let's just be intentional. Black women, we have for years have been tokenized. So when, you know, opportunities of invites, especially when there is no benefit, no positive monetary that may be provided, you know, we are in survival mode. So not a lot of time in that survival mode do we have the opportunity to always be at the forefront of certainly what we're not going to be benefited from. And I think that we also need to look at the invite on the Black culture. You know, just inviting me, you know, does not mean that you really want me at the table. There's a lot of times where we're missed from the table because we're on the menu. And we have felt that through years. And so what happens is that the authenticity of an invite doesn't feel authentic. And so it's very challenging for us to kind of debate in our minds if there would be a benefit if I accept it, or is it authentic? And I think also, too, when that invite is given, or when we're being asked at the table and no longer on the menu, we're not looking for you to give us privilege because of that invite. We're looking for you to tap into privilege that we already possess and acknowledge that, and tell us why we're being offered at the table, why we're being invited to, you know, whatever initiative, whatever group. Again, we have always been tokenized. We have the high in health disparity. We have the high in hate crimes. You know, we have the we have the low poverty in employment, in education. There is a problem. So if we're going to speak about unification, and in your example of your trans initiative inviting us Black women, maybe we need to figure out what will benefit both parties, but how is that invite given? And I must add that if the invite allows us to relive trauma, that's automatically going to be a no, a defensive no, because we go through trauma on a day-to-day basis, not ignoring any other trans racial body. But for us Black people, just because of our heritage, we go through trauma. So we have to be very clear on how that invite is given, and don't disappoint us once we come to the table. No one wants to eat their own food, especially when it's burnt. We will rather enjoy and allow our ingredients to show you what our culture is, what privilege we have, and that we actually should have always been included. Don't give us an invite at the last minute.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate what you're saying, and I will say, and okay, allow me just a second of defensiveness, and then I'll collect myself, which is I did my outreach at the very start, and I did my outreach equally to all groups. I think that some of the places where I went wrong in retrospect is, one thing is inherently probably the way that I compose things, and just simply a picture of myself, and the way that I write my copy and stuff like that could be very, very white. And one of the things I could have done is I could have reached out to several of my Black friends and say, read this and tell me if this reads true for you. And I didn't do that because of a matter of speed. And I just figured that what doesn't trigger me doesn't trigger anybody else. And so I think that in that sense, I just wasn't thorough enough in thinking about the implications. One, and I really like to speak in analogies, so hopefully this will work. One analogy that comes to mind, one parallel that comes to mind, is in the middle of the summit, a male, a white man entrepreneur contacted me from Costa Rica, and he said he wanted to be a panelist on this summit. And I met him with a great deal of suspicion. And I still opened kind of, I said, all right, well, tell me what you got. But I was very, very skeptical. And I had my guard up for a long time. And eventually he won me over. And he is a panelist on this talk. His name is Noam Kostuki. And he's Belgian, I think. And he's dating a trans woman. And he wants to give us tips on entrepreneurship. It was a good talk. There were a couple of things that he said that seemed a little bit clueless or seemed a little bit off. But in general, I could see that his heart was in the right place. But I find that to be a tremendous analogy to probably the way that I'm perceived when I'm speaking to Black trans women. One of the things also that, quite frankly, and this is very naive of me, is the fact that I really feel that, and to Carmarian's point, I didn't really feel that there were two demographics. I felt that there was only one because we're all marginalized because of our transness. And for some reason, which now escapes me, I didn't think that issues of race would port over because at this point we're all in the same room. And that wasn't quite the case, I think.
Let me also add this real quick, because you bring up a great point when you're talking about transism, and then we speak about marginalization. And I'll be remiss if I didn't mention this, is that, yes, we are unified because we are trans. The platforms that I serve, the platform you serve on, and these wonderful ladies that are panelists with me serve on, but we all have to be cognizant that when we set an atmosphere to allow inclusion, that if we are not careful, we will duplicate what we came out of, or we won't take our time, and we'll really realize that within the marginalization, there are marginalizations. So when we speak about the dynamic of racism in our trans community, there is still privilege versus non-privilege, okay? I like to look at privilege is that you will never understand my privilege and know I have privilege unless you understand and can respect my culture, okay? And vice versa. At the same time, what's important is that when we are marginalized as African American, as Black individuals within the trans community, then therefore that does not stem across the board of the trans community, okay? That is intentional, a Black issue, that if it is concerned of any of our other races within the trans community, then therefore make sure that the atmosphere and the environment is so inclusive that we don't feel marginalized. And I'm not saying that you did that particularly intentional, but we do have that. There is a division. And let's just be frank and honest. I know this is going live and it's okay. But at the same time, we have a division within the trans community. That's why we continue to have these level of conversations, like prime example, what we're doing now, to always combat what are we missing. What are we missing is the unification to understand that my story is not going to be your story because of my race, because of my intersectionality of who I am, because of my experiences. And if we do not respect or at least find a way to empathize, then there will always be one race, one genre in our community that will feel even more marginalized within this marginalized trans community.
Exactly.
To add to that, that was a really great point. That was where I was going. But additionally, I think that the marginalization within the marginalized community, trans women of color in the trans community, is obviously a systemic issue within. I mean, this is just how the world works. It's nothing abnormal to the bigger picture of Black people in white America. So this isn't a trans-specific issue necessarily. This is a systemic issue. But I did a report about Black women in in higher education, professors and stuff, and they were feeling the same way, even among their higher educated colleagues, that, you know, when there were resources and just resources and other type of things that were being allotted to faculty, they weren't being told because they weren't being thought about. They, you know, if Sally told Becky, Sally and Becky never thought to tell, you know, their Black colleagues. They never, you know, they never think about including, and, you know, so I think that part, that, I don't want to say insensitivity, but just the white privilege of, you know, I just never think about Black trans people or Black people, just really continues to hurt and deepens those wounds that people of color, people that are trans, feel about other cultures, the white culture.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing this. This is actually extremely useful information. Vanessa, were you about to add something?
No, I was going to
Yeah,
add
go ahead.
something. I was going to say that's the difference between a complacent person that's just living, that think they're not racist, and a person who is a great ally, having the constant gall and bravery and courage to fight for inclusion, like to not let those things slip out of your mind, not say, oh, I'm gonna tell Becky, but not tell Keisha. It's that's what a great ally is, the consistency of you constantly fighting for inclusive spaces. That's what makes you a great ally. You have to fight for it constantly. Yes, nobody's perfect. We're gonna falter, blah 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 blah. But if you are consistently over and over and over creating spaces, people are going to recognize it. You're going to be doing your job as an ally. To me,
right. Makes sense. Yes, Carmarion.
And the thing is that, you know, if you're saying that you thought of recognize that we weren't included in your conference, I don't think most people realize that. You know, they don't have that self-reflection and say, oh, wow, I thought I included everybody. And it's, you know, that's a good thing to you that, you know, you did recognize that.
Yeah, I would have felt really, really self-conscious if I had realized this belatedly. So in that sense, I'm really fortunate. Carmarion, you brought up a point that I really would like to dig in a little bit deeper, which is you spoke about your privilege and and I think that you're speaking also about the value of your culture and what it can bring across the board to other cultures and to the rest of the room, so to speak. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, you know, this is not trying to have a conversation privilege on privilege, okay? What I can share is that I never want any community to look at the people of color community, particularly the Black community, we don't have privilege. You know, our privilege comes from our experience of how strong we are. It comes from our ancestors laying a foundation and giving us that culture of our roots that allows us to withstand anything. You know, we're overcomers really because of our privilege that we have because of our teaching. What's important is that I think a lot of times we are remiss because it is a blend decision from society versus gender versus someone's orientation. If I take that all out of the equation, just look at race, it's ingrained that we as Black people, the system is working. It was meant that Blacks at the bottom, whites at the top, and any other ethnicity in between. It is working. What the challenge is that we have, like Diamond said, we have allies out there who have recognized that the system may be working for us, the formula, but the system can work a lot better if we didn't have that certain formula, but allow all of us to ingrain ourselves so we can all have a level of privilege to move forward in this society. May I not speak on this, but had we had an opportunity to come together with all of our privileges, then we will have a different, I believe, a different stand as it relates to our leadership of our country per se, or it will hold be a different magnitude. But when we bring that back to the trans community, now let me link on the LGBT. First of all, why is T at the end? We have just as much privilege, even though we're not an orientation. Let's get that clear. Why we're lumped in with orientations, I'll never understand. But had it not been for the trans-identified community, there would not be privilege in the LGBT community, okay? So
Yeah, the
when we
pride
water
movement
that
would have
even,
happened.
right, if we water that even more down, it was the people of color, trans women, who was there on the front line to ensure that we as a trans community, not by race, age, gender, height, pretty, brick, fish, film, masculine, none of that. It provided privilege to all of us. And I dare us in this opportunity where hate crimes is at the highest and violence is at the highest, and our attackers can get off from going to jail because there is a law that's in place that they panic, so they get off, that we can't come together and pull our privilege as it once was in order to have a trans movement and not a trans privilege movement. And we can see very clearly that when we put all of ourselves in a strainer and strain us out, who is always left in the strainer? And it's always those ones that society that we have adopted in our own community will always be on top. And those are the non-people of color, because we have only duplicated what we came out of, and we're really not being intentional or authentic in our community as the way we should be. But guess what? There's still more time. That's the reason why we have such dialogues on today, like we're having, is so we can produce and other trans individual can link with us and say, I understand now. I have to do my part as being trans, but I also can be an ally to an ethnicity group, to a classism group, to someone who don't have education or don't have employment, to someone, you know, who cannot look presentable in their transition for whatever reason. We are allies. We are our own Garden of Eden. We can write this plan in ordinance so we can really understand that it's not about privilege in our community. And if we don't get past that, then our community will never thrive in way it was intended for us to be authentic, intentional, and radical.
I like that very much, and that goes right in the teeth of the way that a lot of the LGBT movement has been approaching things, in the fact that they lead with the white male, heterocentrically presenting gay male, the top male, usually in an effort to I'm thinking that the point of view is that this will be the least objectionable demographic, and they will bridge the gap, and they will talk to heteronormative privilege. And so that's been kind of the movement. And because of that, it's always like, well, you trans women stay way in the back and don't disturb what we have going, and you eventually will get what's coming, but let us work out the deal. And that's not the way that at inception the Pride movement started. The movement started with non-passing trans women of color leading the movement. So in a way, that speaks volumes for the fact that we should potentially just find ways to completely disturb and disrupt this idea of privilege and possibility being the way that we communicate to the mainstream. I think that's one of the sticking points, is the fact that we're constantly trying to appease or speak to mainstream, and so potentially there's this kind of strategic or apologetic kind of a vibe, and that's never how it worked. That's not how it worked. If you're going to be revolutionary, just be inclusive and intersectional to begin with. But I do think that, and Diamond, you said originally, are we going to be one-on-one, or are we going to be deeper? And I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that I might be dragging the conversation down by being kind of remedial. So this has been a really good intro.
that we have to know that, just like Kamarian said, as far as our privileges, one of our privileges as trans people, we are behind the mask. Like, we are behind the mask of race. We are behind the mask of sexuality. We are behind the mask of identity. So we have a privilege from our perspective to be able to teach this world. We can, like she said, as far as our country's administration, we can teach the world how to be inclusive, but it has to start with ourselves. There's no reason why our Black trans women, the ones that are getting shine, are not talking about how Black trans men are being silenced. Things that we can do from the inside out that can change the world and impact the world, just like she just said, from Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, starting that in Stonewall. Look at what it opened up for all LGBT. So we have to continue that legacy and go forward with our privileges and teach the world how to be a better people and how to be better to each other. And it starts with us, because if you uplift the least of us, it's going to change the world to a better place for the rest of us.
Yeah, I liked it a lot, and that came up quite strongly. The talk that Bryn Tannehill gave, which I'm going to be posting on Sunday, I believe, she spent almost the entire hour talking about issues of race and talking about intersectionality and talking about racism in America today. And she spoke very little about trans issues. And I actually found that commendable because of the fact that she's clued in as to the importance of caring about intersectionality and about being activists across the board. What are the things that people in positions of leadership within the Black culture are concerned about in terms of the Black culture?
For me personally, it's about not leaving people behind, giving people chances, reaching back, opening up paths, creating our own spaces. That's another thing that about getting an invite. Sometimes you got to create your own spaces, create your own opportunities to get revenue. Nowadays, especially with the internet and technology, we have a whole world that was not open to our older generation. Back in the 70s, 80s, we have the internet. We can network like no other generation. But we can get information and share opportunities and create platforms where we can revenue. So one of the things, don't be limited to waiting for invitations. Don't be limited to sticking with the same blueprint that the bigger mainstream culture is doing. Everybody, from the young one, don't just limelight by yourself, bring people along.
Can you repeat that sentence, because it broke up a little bit and this was important?
In the limelight alone won't bring you.
Gotcha. By the way, there's something that I wanted to highlight from my own experience that I'm hoping is going to make sense, which is I generally perceived issues of race in America in primarily in a Black versus white kind of a view, and to some extent Hispanic versus white kind of a view, and that pretty much is where my understanding of race, or my activism of race, ended. And I met, fell in love, and have been dating for last year an Asian person, and I became aware of issues that had never been in my radar, had never been visible to me, and they are very, very visible now. We went to Santa Barbara for our anniversary weekend, and she made all the plans. I'm going to say they because they prefer they. They made all the plans. They made all the arrangements. They interacted with a whole bunch of people along the way, and the Airbnb person immediately said, "Does she speak English?" And that's because the last name is a Chinese last name, but the first name is English, and they had already interacted before. And so we painstakingly explained that we're talking about an American who is from Seattle, who is living in LA, and who has already spoken with her a couple of times. And then when we got there, I called her again, and the first thing out of her mouth is, "Does your partner speak English?" And it was stupefying. And there's a few other examples too. A couple of silly jokes that came about. The word "chink" showed up at a couple of at one point in a gathering, and I became very sensitized to the trigger points and the microaggressions that are kind of constant in their life. And so I'm kind of rueful at my ignorance before, and I'm kind of experiencing a very similar thing by interacting with you ladies today. And there's a ramp up, but I really appreciate that ramp up is afforded. One thing that I want to dive into something a little bit different than white versus black, and one thing that concerns me greatly is the fact that black trans women are victims of violence to much higher degrees than their counterparts in any other race. 21 trans women have been murdered this year. All but 2 are black trans women, and I'm wondering. I hesitate to venture a guess, so I'm wondering if I can ask you if you can have any idea of what's different in the social atmosphere around them, what that makes them more endangered than other demographics.
I think what makes them more endangered is the perception of gay and trans people as in a religious aspect as sinful and I guess demonic, well, however you want to phrase that. And people have such a hate ingrained in them about people in the LGBT community. So, and there's a lot of misconceptions about people, trans people. People always assume once somebody is murdered by somebody, oh, she was tricking them and she was doing this, and the motherfucker probably, probably had AIDS and gay, all of these things, these negative things. There's nothing ever positive generally that comes from the media. It's just, I think it boils down to a lot of people perpetrate violence against trans women, like the Breakfast Club. When Janet Mock was on there, they were asking her about had she ever in her past tricked a man and not told him that she was transgender, and she said yes. Well, the next day, she brought the host brought up that story to a comedian, and the comedian said that he would kill her.
I remember it was very, very raw, and there didn't seem to be any hesitation in using the word kill, and it was staggering that somebody would say that on a public platform.
Right.
I'd like to mention to say one thing, which is...
My point is that if that had been said about, anybody else, they look what they did to Kathy Griffin about a plastic head. They all but burned her house down about this, but that show is still on. It's it had a momentary flare up, but I don't think the response was stern enough for such a negative thing, and that acceptance is at the root of why we're so endangered.
I know that you ladies are on your phones, most of you, so you're not keeping track of the chat. Somebody with the username C. Gilmore just tuned in and said, "Hey, Diamond and Nessa, must be a friend of yours."
Yes, Christina.
Hey, Christina. So
one of the things I kind of want to add is our culture as a whole. The reason why we had to have a Black Lives Matter movement was because our culture as a whole constantly, subconsciously and consciously says that. The same thing goes with women's lives. Women don't have agency over their bodies. They are expendable. They are objectified. Because we are at that intersection of womanhood and Blackness, the cause invites people to say, we can kill you because you really are an expendable person. You bring no value to the earth. You bring no value or enrichment to us. This is what the narrative of our country has been for a long time in regards to Black women. So therefore, being that we are Black women, we are going to, at our transition, we inherited that kind of uselessness. Not true uselessness, but that implication when it comes to our society. So while we are the most marginalized in regard to that type of violence, he has said it is okay to take these lives because they don't matter. Have a movement of lives matter.
I'd like to throw in a different theory, and I'm not rejecting your theory. They could both be running in parallel, but there's, my gut tells me that it's a different story that we're witnessing. The country that has the biggest rate of murder against trans women and has the biggest rate of violence against trans women in Latin America is Colombia, and Brazil is a close second. And the thing that's inherent in Colombia that's also pretty noticeable in Argentina is machismo. And machismo is a type of exaggerated hypermasculinity that men need to conform to. That's the very notion of them being gay, the very notion of them having any kind of taint of gayness is a direct threat to their survival, to their very being. They have to constantly be very, very heteronormatively hypermasculine, and this has all kinds of toxic effects in the relationships with women. But aside from that, I remember getting into a cab in Argentina and striking a conversation with a cab driver. And at the time I was presenting mail, and he very casually said that, and also interesting that the word puta in Spanish means hooker or whore. The word puto in Spanish means homosexual. So it's a really wrong parallelism. But he said that he would much rather have a daughter that's puta than a son that's puto. In other words, he would much rather have a sex worker for a daughter than an LGBT offspring. And then he very casually added that if his son was in fact a puto, he would have to kill them. And he said it as he was turning on a signal and making a turn, as the casual consequence, like, well, obviously that's what you'd have to do. There was absolutely no sense of this is abnormal, and it hit me to the core. So in my opinion, I think that a lot of this violence is driven not by the perception of trans women and Black trans women as useless, but by this terrified fear among some Latin men and potentially, I think, in the Black community, Black men, about being challenged about their masculinity. What do you ladies think of that?
I think it's deeper than that, because across the board, Black trans women and Black cis women, the leading cause of death for them is homicide through domestic partnerships. So that's all it's all a women thing. So being that it's not that trans women and trans women, I think, and I don't necessarily think, I think that there's a level to that is true, but I think it's along parallel with patriarchy, of course, because it devalues not just a woman. The
Hang on, Diamond, you're breaking up a lot, and we're kind of missing a lot of your sentence right now.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back.
Even in the gay male community, person is one that is looked down on, one that is most marginal, one that is you slide on profiles, oh, no fat systems. So I think just a femme body in the patriarchy, because of machismo, because of all that is the reason why we are expendable. It's a system that our mothers have talked about for years and years and years. And it goes back to this conversation. We have to be intentional in breaking these systems down. It is a fight.
We have to be intentional in breaking these systems down. That's the last I heard.
Yes.
Carmarian, to what extent do you think that I'm onto something in terms of the fact that in the Black community, hypermasculinity and violent masculinity is almost held up as a value or as a virtue?
I certainly think that everyone's story is going to be different. So my response is going to be my own personal response. And I must make that disclosure. How I do foresee this is that before someone recognize or know that I'm trans, they know that I'm Black first. Okay, and that comes with its level of harm if there are individuals that are still very racial and prejudiced. Okay, and then to add on that I am a trans woman who has no longer have privilege as a status of a male identified and what society gives that level of privilege to, then I am looked upon not only being Black, of being racially prejudiced. I'm looked at being a freak because I'm trans. My womanhood puts me in a lower class. And so since systems are not set up for me being Black, me being a woman, and systems are not inclusive enough, I have to take a different approach that at times, I'm sure that if we make some level of assessments or speak to maybe our ancestors who have gone before us in a horrific way that we will always honor their life, is that we as trans individuals, there is a certain level of validation through our process. That validation can be, our goals. It can also be the goals of being loved on or falling in love, which comes also to sexual need, which also comes with probably not making the best appropriate decisions, systems that are not inclusive enough where I can get a job. So I resort into doing street connoisseur. I put a title to it because you can claim taxes on a title. But that's for most people sex work or commercial sex. But at the same time, these level of decisions are made because the system is not prepared. And we as individuals who have a certain of opportunities to change these systems through showing up to be counted, to vote, to be, trans and advocate and be in office to ensure that some of these changes are made. It does hurt the Black community because, again, before I am seen that I'm trans, I am Black. And that already comes with some level of hurt, some level of being treated less than, and then to add the trans component. Now, when we speak about these men who brutally attack us, most times all the way to death, we really have to ask the question is that the conflict possibly is because in our Black culture, we are taught to be strong. Men are taught to be strong. So therefore, even though I change or I'm walking in my authenticity, I don't like saying I found my new truth. I've always been true to myself. The society is the one who taught me a lie, but that's a whole nother story. But at the same time, if I am taught to be strong as a male identified, when I walk in my authenticity, that character transfer with me because it what protects me and my transition. And so sometimes that can be very combative to someone who has that level of masculinity that is threatened based off my strong presence of being trans. So at the formula end, if I have needs and I'm vulnerable, but yet I'm trying to be strong, in the midst of that, these men are taking advantage and they're getting what they want. They're taking full advantage of us. And what we get in return is going to be violence, it's going to be death. And so, and then who do we run to if we do survive? Because the system is not prepared for us to be able to be taken even seriously because one, first, the color of my skin, and then two, I'm trans identified, and three, it's society's imprint that anything that comes to me negatively or bad, I ask because they feel that this is a choice rather than knowing that this is my authenticity. Do you think I want to wake up every day? May not can change the color of my skin. I don't care how much light foundation I may put on. That's not going to change nothing. In the same token, my authenticity is my trans. Every day, do you think I want to wake up and I want to be hunted because after they get past the black, now I have to deal with trans, and after I deal with trans, then I have to deal that I'm a woman, and after dealing with that, then my vulnerability of validations, and then me not making the decision. There is something wrong with the puzzle. And that's because it goes back to systems. There is nothing to protect us, to take us serious. And so when these horrific statistics comes out as it relates to death, I know you gave us statistics from overseas, but right now in our backyard, like you stated, there are more women of color, particularly black, that are being murdered at the moment, as we speak, and we cover them with peace in the atmosphere, that they are protected, but the system doesn't work for us. And how do we change that? Is that we have to come together, all of us, that's including our allies, and we have to be in position. Yes, trans lives matter, black lives matter, but all lives matter. When we stop we stop separating what matters and know that everything matters and that we all can gain, then I think that we can change some of these systems that will benefit us, and we can start seeing the numbers reduce or no longer have the level of hate crimes and violence that we have in the trans community, particularly the black community.
Let me add another layer to what Kamarian said when she was talking about the conditioning of black males, because with black trans women, there is a couple of layers of things. Another thing, black women are conditioned, their womanhood is validated by the amount of suffering they can withstand in love, in family, you know, even back from slavery. They are shrouded as this black strong woman, and your womanhood is validated in that space where if you can, the more you can suffer and be a down, quote unquote, down ass chick with a man through his violence, through his everything, that's the greater woman that you are, because you stood by your man in hard times. And that is another layer of that conditioning that we seen our mothers struggle through things. And, you know, she was our God. She was the woman. She was the, you know, when she struggled, you have to sit there and deal with the stuff. And we have been ingrained in us to have that conditioning that as a black woman, you're supposed to be strong. We've been
and
through
these kind
everything.
of conditionings are the kind of thing that I was picking at, is the fact that there are some foundational cultural principles that are faulty and that then inspire violence in the long run. And I think that Kamarian is onto something by saying that we have been conditioned for some of our lives, in my case, for 40 years, with the way that I would react to conflict, with the way that I would react to somebody belittling me or challenging me from a male perspective. And I carry that with me, and I tend to be more conciliatory now that I'm presenting female. I feel more comfortable being more conciliatory. But every now and then, if somebody pushes me, and especially if they're really, really stepping on me as a woman, then 40 years of male privilege show up and say, excuse me, because that's my conditioning and that's my socialization. So I can totally see, and I'm 5 feet tall, so I can see how that would serve me really poorly when confronting a big guy.
Cute. That's privilege, honey. That's privilege.
But one thing that occurred to me is this analogy, and I'm talking about the Breakfast Club specifically. I don't know if you guys remember in the movie Grease, the moment when they're singing to Danny Zuko, I think his name was, and they are asking about his experiences with the new gal, and Kaneki says, tell me more, did she put up a fight? And back then, this is just part of the lyrics. And nowadays, my 16-year-old son is aware of this, and we've also seen parodies on YouTube. There's a great parody on YouTube where they recreate that song, and then Kaneki says, tell me more, did she put up a fight? And all of the members of the gang turn to Kaneki and go, what the hell, man? What's wrong with you? And so it took from 1978 until now, that's almost 40 years, for us to catch up to the fact that this is very wrong. Wait a minute, so rapey vibes were absolutely okay in the sense of this rape. So maybe on that premise, we're 40 years away, 38 years away from somebody at the Breakfast Club to go, what did you just say? And 40 years is too long.
One of the things that I noticed at the Breakfast Club, that situation that really stood out with me, when Vanessa brought up the comedian coming back to the and another girl came on the show, and we were talking about that comedian Amanda Seales. She is the light-skinned girl on the show Insecure. She came on and she was talking about a couple of months ago, she had an engagement with Caitlyn Jenner, and she read her for filth, blah, 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 blah. And so Charlemagne was like, do you think he kept misgendering Caitlyn, and the other host, Envy, said, it's a she, like, you need to correct that. And it's she, that's the person, she. I don't want to get in trouble because they had just got all this flack from the Janet situation. And Charlemagne responded, oh, you're being too serious. I'm still in the... And it pissed me off because, no, you're not in the learning process. This is not the first time you have been in a situation where people have told you that pronouns are important to trans people. You are just not accepting. You're not in a learning process. You're not learning. You're not trying to learn. And that was one of the situations that I took from that situation, because there are people out here who will claim to be allies, who will give you space. Go back to what Carmarian was talking about in the beginning when she was talking about, we don't want to come in space where we're going to experience, you just don't want to do that. So there are people who are going to give you space that have no intention of in your politics forwards into the mainstream. Their intention really is still go back to that old school Jerry Springer exploit you. I just have you here because because I know it's going to bring ratings. I know it's going to bring resources. Resources I'm talking about like nonprofits who benefits off us. So they get money for our to help us, but they don't actually get the programs to actually help us. So people go back to that same exploitive of, hey, I am going to bring this trans woman on or bring this token trans woman in so we can get some resources. And I think that goes back to what I've been repeating. You have to be intentionally fighting these systems that are using us as tokens, that is benefiting off our backs. We learn from our Black women in slavery, black men in slavery, that this system is created to benefit off our backs, and we have to do things to create space where Black people are benefiting.
Yeah, we need more Rosewoods.
Amen.
You said, can you say that again, where Black people are benefiting? And because we didn't hear you.
From your own labor,
we
right?
Create spaces where Black people are benefiting, where Black people create spaces where they can get their own revenue, where they like, why do I see no black hair companies that are benefiting from this billions of dollars that we're spending in hair care, and I don't see black hair companies other that are not doing fucked up shit. So you got the Carol's Daughters, you got the Shea Moistures. They're shrouded as a black hair company, but they're owned in part by big white conglomerate companies. So this is what I'm talking, creating spaces in multiple situations where are benefiting. You know, like BET. BET was for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
A whole white company has owned it and taken up space to, you know, I just feel like we have to be out changing that system.
I remember seeing a series called The Stealing of Cool, and the center of that story, and it wasn't a racial point, but it was the fact that it's always some marginalized group, and in this case, some of the examples that were given were teenagers, and poor teenagers usually. For example, they created the skater culture, and almost everything that's cool usually comes from pockets of society like that, lacking resources and in some way marginalized. And then, of course, some merchant finds it and says, I'm going to make bucks with this, and then packages it and sells it elsewhere. And so that tension between the authenticity of the original group and then the exploitative thing that comes later. One thing that I saw that I really liked was I visited with Bambi Salcedo, and I visited the Trans Latina Coalition, and I really liked how they created a safe space for Latinas in LA. And I'm wondering to what extent we have initiatives like that going on for the Black community and for Black trans women in particular in different places in the country. To what extent are you aware of places like this, Carmarian?
Well, I mean, I don't think this is I'm using this as a plug-in to an organization that I lead very proudly.
Oh, I'm
but
very
I think
happy for you to
that,
promote it.
Yeah, but before we start that, let me just give you my philosophy on choice words is that I certainly can appreciate someone creating an atmosphere that says this is a safe place, but I'm trans and I'm Black and there's no such thing as a safe space. You can create a safer space. Okay. And so when we speak about what's out there for the Black community, one of the things that Black Trans Women Inc., which feeds into our national organization, advocacy organization, which is Black Trans Advocacy, is that we have determined that in order for us to move past this mediocre, because everyone is using this word safe space, and it's really not safe. It's almost in the same token that you're welcome here and you get there paying your coins, but you find out that you're really not welcome and they still give you a bill and they still expect you to pay. So I want to kind of shift our language a little bit and really be inclusive and intentional about stating that we are attempting to create a brave space that allows us to really be accountable if we mess up, and be empathetic if we don't get it right the first time, and be in position where apology can be shared across the board. And that's what I like about what I'm able in my leadership, and my counterpart who runs the Black trans male side. What we do in our leadership role is that we're not going to get it right. We didn't have a blueprint being Black and trans. Okay. And we certainly can't use anything that's out there because it's culturally not prepared to allow us to thrive in. So we have found with our organization with Black trans women and Black trans advocacy is that if we're just intentional and if we just create the brave space to allow them to come in, because there is an opportunity for people to come in so we can learn from as well. Okay, that's not minimizing anyone who's doing a great work and want to continue using safe spaces, but I really feel that we should be very intentional, especially to the trans community who are every day already discriminated and rejected, and say, you know what, my invite to you is for you to come in and be very brave. And whatever that look like, we will affirm you in the place that you're in. And that is what my organization tries to offer to our Black trans community, because it starts at home first. And I promise you, all of my Black brothers and sisters are family, because one is culturally, we identify with each other. Two, we share the same experience. And three, at the end of the day, they will be on the front line with me before any other race would be, because of the identification of who we are.
And actually, I think that this is a good time for us to speak a little bit of the work that you do. And then I want to allow a little bit of time for Diamond to speak about the kind of work that she has accomplished with her podcast. But if we can speak a little bit about the organization and the kind of work that it does, it would be really good. And we have enough time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
when was it born? When was it born?
So we're leading now up into for a advocacy conference, or the Black Trans Advocacy Conference, 7 years. Black Trans Women Inc. is 6 years old, and I'm very excited about that. We have an annual conference generally at the end of April each year. Information, save the date, is already circulating on Facebook. It's a wonderful opportunity that we call a family reunion, but we do have a theme. You come in during the day and you are empowered. But then we have fun in the evening time. It's a full week. It's not one of those summits where you come for 2 or 3 days. If you come the full week, because you will bound to miss something, all the way to our family picnic, which is usually at a ranch when we're outside and we're just having fun. And all the places that we've chosen are very inclusive. They allow us to come in very brave. And these are people that we have immediately who invite us to come back to them, because we have deputized them to true advocates to our community. So how BTWI was birthed out is because we felt that, as we talked about earlier, when we have conversations about our trans experiences, not a lot of time Black trans women voices are heard. So we wanted to make sure that every Black trans woman voice is heard through whatever genre or capacity that is. This is a social organization, it's an advocacy organization, but most of all, it's a family organization to allow some connectivity, and it allows us to be able to grow together as a family. Yes, we have our good and bad days, but at the end of the day, we have an opportunity to grow and be stronger when we come together. So that's just a snippet about the organization that I actually lead. We actually have a spiritual component as well to it, and I'm happy to share that also brings me joy, because my background is theology. And so what we try to do is allow people to be affirmed in whatever spiritual state there is in. We as a culture are very attached to our religion. We were reared in religion, but it's the first place that we're shunned from and we're hurt from. But it's attached to our culture and who we are. And so we try to provide an opportunity to allow spirituality to be unveiled and be honored and affirmed, however it looks, however it is said, however it's promoted, so they will know that they are still attached culturally to their spirituality. So it's just a fun day. I can, what I'm most proud about in the next year's conference, there's a lot of changes that are happening. But the biggest change is that because our youth component, every day there is a new youth who is coming out, and let me rephrase that, who is walking in their authenticity, that needs a family to affirm them. Their family needs allies as us to help them rear their young child. And so we will be introducing our trans youth component with some additional sessions for families to bring their children, so they will also know that they are not the only ones at their age that has decided to live their authentic self. And so it's just a wonderful family reunion. And in between those times, we try to meet as a region, we partner with our brother organization, which is Black Trans Men Inc. And once a month on a weekend, we travel to each one of our regions and we try to provide our family an opportunity to get together for a full day Saturday of a summit where we can actually just fellowship. What we understand from Black culture is fellowship is very important. And so that is like the beacon of our organization. Before we can do anything else, we must come together and we must commune and we must fellowship, because our culture is what technically defines us. It's not about my being trans. It's about my culture. And if I can get you to understand my culture, then you can understand that I have privilege. You can understand that I am walking in my truth or my authenticity, and you will understand that my Blackness never stopped me. It always gave me power.
Thank you, Carmarian. That was
Did
very
you
well
say
said.
amen? Did somebody say amen? I thought I heard somebody say amen.
Amen.
Pay your tithes this way. I got PayPal.
It's interesting, by the way, that it's interesting what you say, because I did encounter, I'm an atheist myself, and I had a fraught and difficult path with different religions in my life. And I spoke with Callie Wright, who is not only an atheist, but a militant atheist. And one of the reasons why she does the Gaytheist Manifesto, which is her podcast, is because of the way that in LGBT spaces, she feels that there isn't enough of a space for atheists. And then I spoke to Talia Johnson, who is a Jewish, she's training to be, I forget now, but she's training to be a Jewish priestess. And I spoke with a rabbi as well. And it's interesting how we experience religion both as an oppressor and also as a comfort. And I really do understand the cultural and community element, especially in Black churches, in terms of community and how much it provides solace. I grew up in Russian church, and Russian church does not provide that. But Argentinian community churches did, and there was a strong sense of community in that. And I didn't necessarily relate to the Catholicism, but I related to that sense of community. And by the way, when the little sample that I had of the Baptist churches in the South during my stint as a volunteer during Katrina and Rita made me long for that sense of community in Louisiana and Mississippi, and I really, really liked it. So I can see how if you're estranged and pushed away from that type of community, it's really, really important to rebuild it and to provide that kind of nurture. So I like the fact that you have that element added to your mix. That's it's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
What was, I'm going to switch to Diamond. What was the original purpose for you creating the, oh, somebody's having a little background noise. I'm not sure who it is. Diamond, what was the original intent of your podcast? What was the vision, so to speak, of you creating your podcast?
Like Marian said, fellowshipping is like just a key component to your self-care. That's just something really authentic about being amongst your own tribe and on your own people that just heals you from a spiritual level and just a physical level as well. Another element is visibility, and so that's what was important about creating my YouTube and creating my podcast. During the 2016 election, there was a lot of times that when we were spoken of in regards to transness, the bathroom issue was the only thing that we were allowed to speak on. That's the only thing that when you heard somebody talked about in the political arena, they were asked questions about that. I care about more things than the bathroom. I care about healthcare. I care about employment. I care about homelessness. I care about HIV and AIDS. I care about education. I care about so many things that affect my life in such strong ways that the bathroom is on one of the bottom. So in my mind, I wanted to create a space for myself to speak out. My YouTube started in 2008 and it grew. I have 2.4 million views. I have about 12,000 subscribers. But it started for me to be to give a visible platform for people who are younger to look at me and say, hey, I'm experiencing this. You are sharing stories that I may go through or I may not go through, but I have some type of visual that can say, hey, I relate to this. This is somebody in my tribe. And I felt that was powerful for power youth. I felt that it was something that I needed to know that I wasn't alone, and to center me and who I am. That's what I wanted to create. I'm all about creating your own spaces. We have the technology to do it. Don't be afraid. Anybody can start a podcast. Anybody can start YouTube. Anybody can write a book. Nowadays, we have the technology to access and tap people and tap our tribe from across the world. And so that was what I wanted to create my space to be about, to share stories that me as a Black trans woman could share, so other Black trans people can hear them, relate to them, and understand that they're not alone. And people outside of my community can hear the stories and relate to them and understand us a little bit more, to create the intention and the inclusion that I see for our future. And Kamarian has a concept that she can share as far as us creating a trans utopia, and I think it's beautiful. She'll have to go in a little bit more detail, but I think that's my part in creating this utopia that we strive for. Because what's the point in making these changes and being rebellious against these systems if you don't have a bigger dream that are bigger than the systems? And so that was why I created my space.
I like it very much. I got reminded of a TED conference. I'm sorry, it's possibly me. The voice is coming through, and I'm hearing myself talk while I try to talk. Or maybe somebody has me on speaker.
I hear you.
There is a TED talk by a Nigerian woman called Chimamanda Ngozi, and it's called "The Danger of a Single Story." And her point is that the single story of the Nigerian woman is a very rural, very disempowered woman who is subservient to the man, which is not at all the experience of Chimamanda, who is an educated woman from Metropolis. And just the same way that there's a little bit of a single story or single narrative about trans women that I really tried to defy during the summit. This was actually an open agenda of mine when I created the summit. Is I wanted to defy this single narrative, or the fact that we all have this path of always feeling like we're a girl, and then at some point feeling like we have the strong dysphoria at 4 or 5 or 6 years old, and then we get on hormones, and like there's this cookie cutter mold that we all follow. If somebody, I don't know who it is, but I'm on speaker in somebody's machine, and if you could mute me or put headphones on, it would be really appreciated, because I keep hearing the feedback now. But anyway, so one of the things that I was able to highlight in this conference is the fact that there's so many different types of stories in the trans woman community. And it would be wonderful, and I think that you have a platform to do this, Diamond, to show the very, very different experiences that are abundant in the Black trans woman community.
Absolutely. I think my podcast is just like 3 weeks old, so it's pretty new. I've been working on it, trying to get it launched since June the 25th, but we had some maneuvering around to do in regards to getting on iTunes and just having it all set up. But it's all going great now, and we're on iTunes and Just Plate. One of the things that I did with YouTube specifically is bring other people on my channel so they can share their stories, because I have a totally different experience. I may not have went through the same things that they went through. And so I wanted you to see other people and hear other people's journeys and talk to them and interview them. And I did that a lot. And once going forward with my podcast, I am going to bring and be intentional about bringing other people on, talking about colorism, talking about the silence of trans men, talking about patriarchy, talking about anything that I have a moral compass to change and systems that I want to change. I want to bring people who can speak to that better than I can. And I think that's me showing my attention in Got it?
I lost at the end, but you said something that I really, really relate to, which is you want to bring people that can speak to an issue better than you can, which is absolutely what I've done in this session and I've done in the summit in general. I feel that we need manuals. We need manuals that show us how to do this and how to be activists and how to be advocates and how to build community and how to be more nurturing to ourselves and to others. But I'm in a position to make a manual because I am so clueless and naive in a lot of what I do. But what I'm really good at is talking and listening and creating communication channels. And so that's what I hope to accomplish, is to bring voices that can speak much more competently than I can, who bring up the important points and who teach others. So, and I think that we should do more of this. It would be wonderful if organizations such as Trans Latina Coalition and organizations such as Black Trans Women Inc. could serve as inception points, as birth pods to more organizations, not only in America. And by the way, there's people who are watching us from Saudi Arabia. There's people watching us from Philippines and from Thailand and from Peru and from Sweden. So how do we get them to be able to start chapters of their own in these other places? Perhaps one thing that you could do is you could distill the knowledge that you gained in the last 6 years, Carmarion, and put together something like a roadmap to community or something like that. And I realize that I'm giving you quite the homework assignment that perhaps you're not willing to take on because there's a lot of work to be done. But somebody could put this together and it would be an inspiration to create more groups and more groups elsewhere.
So I will tell you this is that you've already tapped into what we're already doing. We actually have an historian of our coalition, per se, our Black Trans Advocacy, that represents both the Black Trans Advocacy, the Black Trans women, the Black Trans men, and even our pageantry. And she, when I tell you that this historian, first, the way we decided to document stuff was to always look back to what was already written and what we're doing different. And this individual has already been keeping memorized, and anytime we need, something for his media use, she can dig all the way back from our first year conference and be able to share light on where we've derived to. I will share that because of the work that she's done and because of our national organization, we have started now being included in other continents and countries. We actually have a chapter and members like already in the Caribbean and Jamaica that comes over to us. We're having conversation in other parts. They may not can come to us every year because of the monetary on where they're at, but we do what you do is to try to connect them through social media, through our support groups, which are all done, electronically. It's also done through social media, so they can know that they are connected. We have individuals that are all the way from England that are connected to us. So I hear what you're saying. What I really, really am excited about is that it's very important in our community that we understand that documentation is important. You say it's a manual, but it also provides us a blueprint, and it also provides us an opportunity to always go back and pick this back up and read it, especially for the new generation, so they will always have history of our trans culture. One of the big pieces that will certainly help out within our trans community, if we can really understand in our own community, just as much we try to hold individuals outside of our community to a standard, is allow us to create and operate in our own narrative. That is so important, because I can't be you. I can't be Miss Diamond and Miss Nessa. I can't be them, because if I operate in my own narrative, that will help somebody else with my blueprint of my narrative, also allow me to define who I am, and then also allowing us to be able to then join and come together. So when we talk about documentation, manual, blueprint, All of this has to all come into conception, no matter where it comes from, but it does need to come. Now, my ideal to you is that if we can get people on the bandwagon programmatically and make this a, you know, a project and put a time frame on it, then how can we publish it? Because that's more important, I feel, because that will then be able to educate those that are not of the trans community, those that are allies, and those that just really need to be educated. There will be so much history in that that I feel that documentation is important. So thank you for bringing that up.
Oh yeah, a group without a memory is a shame, because there's usually so many learnings that come just out of building things and out of community. I wanted to share something here that came across my feed recently, and I really liked it, which applies to me very much. Okay, here's the problem with the idea that oppressed groups can alienate, and please don't trigger the word oppressed. It's used in this context, but I understand that it might be the wrong word. But okay, here's the problem with the idea that oppressed groups can alienate allies by not being nice enough. You shouldn't be an ally because oppressed groups are nice to you. You should be an ally because you believe they deserve basic human rights. Hearing "I hate men" shouldn't make you stop being a feminist. Hearing "fuck white people" shouldn't make white people stop opposing racism. Your opposition to oppression should be moral and immovable. Your belief that all humans should be treated with equal respect shouldn't be conditional based on whether or not individual people are nice to you. And I personally really liked that, and it was something that I couldn't verbalize well enough until I saw this, so I really liked it.
Absolutely. I'm not going to coddle white people. I'm not going to coddle men, coddle anyone that is oppressing me. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to kiss your ass to do what's right. I'm not going to kiss your ass to see my humanity. I'm not going to do any of that. I feel like I was born, and therefore I'm a human. And therefore you should respect my life, respect my value, respect my pursuit of happiness, regardless if it's against what you believe in your religion. If it does not affect you or your family or your happiness, then let me live my truth. Let me live my pursue my. I don't need to coddle you to be a decent person. I don't need to be, oh yes, sir. Let me nice, respectful tone to you, sir. No, I'm not going to do that. And you can't expect me to be oppressed with your foot on my neck and be nice.
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
No,
a perfect example of this is somebody who claimed to be an ally, and this is a cishet male who came up to me and told me that he's very open-minded, he's very liberal, he's very understanding, and I'm always very suspicious of somebody who starts by giving all these adjectives to themselves. And then he said that he's so understanding that he would have no difficulty giving me a hug. And I thought, okay, so you're such an incredible saint that you would deign to touch me.
Oh my God, you touched me.
So that was quite something. I'm going to make a little bit of a swerve. In the interest of time, I don't have a really good bridge for this, but I want to bring up a volatile subject, which is as we create and as you ladies create these Black trans women spaces, to what extent do you think that it might be fruitful? And because I think that it would be, to create spaces where Black women, cis women, trans women hang out together and learn from each other and compare notes and share recipes and cook together and create events together, and where it's just a woman space rather than a trans woman space, cis woman space. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that would be a beautiful thing. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I thought somebody started talking.
Yeah.
I guess there is a lot of feedback. Yeah, no, I think that would be a beautiful thing. I don't know how, I think that would be more of an ally situation than a general space where, you know, women are accepting of trans women, you know, just for all of the things that we mentioned before. And I wanted to touch on what we were just talking about, that, you know, I believe that we should have allies and we should try to, bridge that gap. But I think I'm not the hand holder. I need to educate you on all of this stuff. I feel like if I have to educate you on all of the goings on with who I am, I feel like that demeans me as a person, and I don't want to feel like that. I don't want to feel like I'm the, even though I am a minority, I still don't want to internalize that and having to always educate somebody on their ignorance. I don't think that ends up making an ally. I think them educating themselves and approaching us in our community gives a little more truthfulness to the formation of a relationship.
We're coming to something where I feel a little bit more confident and actually do have a little bit I feel like I have a little bit of competent advice. So I'm really excited because I finally have something that I feel confident about in this talk. But I want to share with you gals, which is as I've been interacting for almost 4 years with the sex positive world community here in LA and in Portland as well, I've created a lot of women empowerment spaces. And so Vanessa, I was very hesitant about the situation of like, will women include me? Will women accept me? And I flipped that completely. And at least for me, it proved really, really successful. And I'm hoping that some of this will be useful in the communities that you form. What I did is I championed women's spaces and I created women's spaces. And so I held 3 or 4 events a month, which were just for women. And how do we know that the trans woman was going to be allowed in the room? How do we know that the trans woman was going to be included and accepted in the room? The trans woman has the freaking keys.
Right.
I ran the event. And so because of that, I was able to create an atmosphere that was absolutely trans friendly. And I didn't have to educate much. And one of the wonderful things at one point, because in other events, which were, this is primarily a men problem, I would get misgendered. And some of the women that I formed, some of the allies that I formed through these women's spaces came up to me, cis women came up to me and said, does this bother you? How can we minimize it for you? And I said, here's the thing. I don't like to be the one who calls attention to it. I don't like to be the one who suddenly centers the attention on myself and brings up the fact that somebody misgendered me. But it would be wonderful if one of you gals acted as my ambassador and took that person aside and said, hey, you're doing it wrong. And it was so good to see that happening and to see somebody hush somebody else and say, no, she, or something. And I wouldn't have to, raise any objection myself. I have to tell you, I experienced a really, really stupid brain fart moment that cracked me up about my own thought processes, because at one point, I created a group, and in this group there were 30 cis women participating. And the word had gotten out, and 2 trans women came and joined this group because they felt safe. And I looked at this group, and I looked at the 2 new arrivals who were trans women, and I thought to myself, how inclusive of me that I'm letting the trans women sit with the cis women.
Right.
And then a little voice inside myself said, check yourself, honey, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But it was really sweet to see that we all sat together and we all interacted. And it wasn't, Vanessa, to your point, it wasn't a matter of educating or of over-explaining or something. We all parted bread together and we all played games together. I had people do, social games and stuff like that. Then we went around the room and talked about women issues. And to my knowledge, in all those events, which I ran for most of 2016, there were no instances among the women of women othering trans women. And I'm really, really proud of that. And I think that it really, really starts with a trans woman running the room and inviting cis women in, as opposed to the usual opposite. And I think that it potentially goes back to Kermarian's point about like, for example, to create Black inclusive spaces and then inviting perhaps white people in, but it's a Black-owned, Black-run place. And so when you start from that approach, then you don't have any possibility of tokenization, objectification, or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good, that's a beautiful thing. I just worry about, you know, the people that come into a community and they partake in the culture and but yet they're not really allies. They're more, you know, like the cisgender woman or the Caucasian person that is in Black culture. They're more imitating. And how do you get them to be recognize us as here with them, as opposed to, oh, I'm cool, I'm here with the this is where I'm coming from, and I'm hanging out with these people. And I feel like that perception of even though even though they're in our space, they still don't feel like we're one of them. And I think that that psychology with the majority culture is hard to bridge. And I think if there's a way to bridge that, I think that would be the start of it. So if that is the start of it, then I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and just socials, do you know what I mean? It wouldn't have to be discussions, political discussions or ideology discussions. It could just be, you know, a cookout, or it could be a picnic or a barbecue together, and let's all hang out and kind of realize the commonalities and the humanity in all of us. I don't know. It's kind of maybe an optimistic and a naive thought, but I think that it might be a start or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Did we lose Carmarion? I just see her picture. I was really interested in her opinion on this concept.
I really want to talk about the myth in the Black community that the degree of rift between cis women and trans women. There have been cis Black women allies in they have come to my aid, helped me. They have given me resources to eat, given me resources to survive. Ready in the
Hold on, you broke up a little bit. Let's wait until the connection restores. And I'm really wondering whether or not we lost Carmarion. Okay, you're coming back. Yeah, you're back. I'm really wondering, have we lost Carmarion, you think?
Cis women who, because they're surviving, they really have given to learn how to survive as a Black trans woman. And so have people like Amber J. Phillips, Jasmine Walker, now Shirley Foster, Alicia Garza, who was one of the founders of the Black Lives, so inclusive. He's talking about Black trans lives.
I really wish we had a better connection. I feel that Diamond is giving us pearls here, and we're only getting about 1/3 of what she's saying.
Can you hear me?
You're coming back, but I think it's better now, yes.
Okay, so we have people like Amber J. Phillips, we have Jasmine Walker, Kimberly Foster, Alicia Garza, who was one of the founders of Black Lives Matter movement. And so these are cis women who are very inclusive, who create space that include trans women, who know that trans women are women, and they come from a different history, but they are women, none the same, and we are affected by male oppression. And I feel like there are already spaces that you just kind of got to find if you want to be included in spaces where cis women are creating fellowship with trans women. They are out here. You just have to find them.
Thank you. Yes.
And one more thing I wanted to add. I really believe that just being visible in the space that you are in, being the person that you are, is, and you know, if you're open and, you know, if you're open about who you are, you know, as a trans woman, is the most one of the biggest ways that you can bridge that gap. I think, you know, having these conversations, Diamond with her podcast. I used to be in spaces where you didn't find trans women. I used to just drive semi trucks, and when I disclosed that to people, you know, it always opened up a conversation of like, wow, I would never think that you would do that. Why not? Why wouldn't you think that I would do that? Well, because I don't know. I don't know why I would think. And you know, I think it's kind of disarming. Maybe I'm naive in that, but when I think more and more trans women become visible that are taking up these platforms that are now able to be taken up, the Janet Mock, the Diamond Styles, the Madison, T.S. Madison, when they're taking up these spaces, they're influencing and I guess socializing culture to who we are. And I think this is hopefully the start of bridging that gap.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm personally really partisan of being visible, and the way I like to describe it myself is being visible and being charming at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a strategy. It's the fact that the lady at the grocery store and the lady at the bank see me, and that's their experience of a trans woman, and on and on and on.
Yes, definitely. I really thrive on seeing trans women not if they're just passable or they're not passable, but if they're trans women, regardless of their passability, owning, I don't want to say owning, but that are not shying away from their transness. If somebody says, "Are you trans?" Yes, I'm trans.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, if they're in a conversation, they just drop the trans bomb, you know, "Oh yes, I'm trans," and blah, 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 blah. I love that kind of interaction when I see that with trans women. I was in a class this year, and we had a person that is non-binary, and they just were, you know, very open in disclosing that. And I found that so comforting and disarming. And even for me with my, I have hang-ups about disclosure of being trans, and to see people, from my perspective, just being so open about who they are, just makes me want to know them, makes me want to know more about them. Like, I didn't really research as much on non-binary. You know, I'm kind of in my bubble, like a lot of people are. So now I think that's really important.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm dating a non-binary person now, and so it's made me understand and learn a lot, and I'm really thankful for that for the experience. But yeah, I absolutely really find it adorable when somebody really casually just says, "Oh, when I transitioned," or "Oh, it's because I'm on hormones because I'm transitioning," and really casually speaks about their transness as if it's no big deal, and that there's nothing that they're ashamed of or fear. And I totally try to do that as well, because it normalizes it and it makes people less afraid. Carmarian, we're talking about the different ways that we can bridge gaps, and Vanessa was talking about trans women just openly and casually talking about their transness without any kind of hesitation. I don't know if you can hear us. Now the image froze. Carmarian is making a valiant attempt at rejoining the conversation.
Come on back to us.
I think I'm back, but my phone just completely died. So can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, you're back.
We can hear you and see you.
Okay.
And we are in the final
perfect. So what was
we were talking about how it bridges gaps when you just when trans women openly disclose their transness without any kind of hesitation or without any indication that it is any kind of a big deal, and how that helps instruct this narrative of the fact that this is normative, this is part of reality, this is part of life, and instead of creating any kind of hush-hush secrecy around it. I recently posted something on Facebook, and for the sake of the story that I was telling, because it was coming out day and I wrote the story about coming out, it felt apropos to use my birth name as part of the story, because I was referring to somebody who greeted me as it's really charming. He hadn't seen me in a while, and he saw me in female form for the first time, and he used a feminized version of my birth name. It was really adorable, and I had to correct him and say, no, my name is Cassandra now. But he really tried. It was really charming. He feminized my birth name, and so I used my birth name in the story as part of the story. And I had to make the conscious choice of like, well, am I afraid of my dead name? I don't even think of it as a dead name. It's not really dead. It's just not my name anymore, but I'm not afraid of it.
So what I will add is that, and when we talk about disclosing,
Mm-hmm.
I have to be very sensitive that everybody is going to respond in whatever manner that's going to protect them. Okay, so I want to make that first known. My personal opinion through my experience is I have found it to be much easier. I have June made 21 years of my transition. So I have some service years. I think I'm an elder in our community, and I'm still young and looking good. So,
Amen.
I thought you were 25.
But what I appreciate that. My grandson would thank you too. So, what I can say honestly, for me, it has helped me to just be honest up front. But there's a caveat: is that me living out my authenticity does not make me a victim. So I do not approach the situation of disclosing myself in a manner as if I'm a victim, such as, I like you, or I know we didn't spend time together, or, let's just be real. I mean, I know I done gave you fellatio, but I got something I need to tell you. I'm not doing all that, because I really think that this is a learning opportunity. So if I don't play the victim, so when I do need to disclose myself, my response to them is, you do know I'm trans, right? If they did not know, it's on their mind, and now let's have dialogue before we move any further. That has helped me to be honest up front, to have that intentional and courageous dialogue up front before anything pops off, okay? Even through my vulnerability, I do that to make wise decision, because a sister get vulnerable just like anybody else. I have my needs. But I find that to be a way also to protect me, and me personally. Now, some people may, have a different avenue of way they disclose. I just choose that I never want to be in a position where I'm articulating as if I'm a victim, because I walk in truth. And guess what? It's an honor if you want to F with me. I promise you'll be satisfied. And that's how I look at it.
Yes, and I really like the idea of the lack of apology, the fact that you're just stating a thing and you're not at all implying any kind of apology for it. At some point recently, I said to somebody, the reason why my voice sounds a little different on the phone is because I'm trans. And the person at the other end said, oh, that's all right, it doesn't bother me. And I said, excuse me, I have to correct you. I didn't make that announcement because I think it might bother you or not. I made that announcement because I want to make sure that nothing that you says bothers me.
Yeah.
Right. And we have to be, when we're talking about disclosure and the openness of it, we understand that we're talking about in a, as Chameleon said, a brave space, but also know that honesty is not a bulletproof vest for a lot of us.
Correct.
A lot of times that, like when we talk about Isla Nettles, who was murdered in Harlem, she was honest and she came clean on the street about her transness, and she's in the grave right now because somebody to murder her because she was honest. So being honest is in an unsafe or unfamiliar space does not always garner you those positions of responses that we're talking about. So we can't be judgmental of the people who chooses to not disclose and chooses because that is their right, because this system in this world is unsafe for us to be. And And so we have to make sure that we create spaces that include those stealth people too,
Yeah,
even though
yeah.
sometimes they're not as open and brave.
Oh, absolutely.
And you
Yes,
know
I
what,
don't want to be
Diamond? And
prescriptive
Diamond,
about.
I really enjoy you saying that. I have to add this is that, you know, even though I'm giving my experience just because of my service years, you know, I've had years to evolve in my response to what I gave you guys. But I am still under the notion and I still live by one rule that not everybody deserves your story at that time,
I
which
like that.
means that we do have to be in position to know when to out ourselves, you know, and when to evolve and be able to exercise that maturity because safety does come first. You heard what I'm saying? Um, but you know, I do think that it's important for me to share that, you know, to my trans brothers and sisters across the board. Not everybody deserves your story at that time, and we have to be in position when we're ready to share that, and also be in a position to receive whatever the outcome is going to actually be or response. But our main objective is to protect ourselves, and so I really co-sign on what you said, Diamond.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I didn't want
it's
to
really
give the,
contextual.
I don't want to give the impression that I meant that all just complete disclosure to anybody and everybody. That is not what I meant. I meant, you
In
know,
certain spaces, yes.
right, in certain spaces, just the freedom to be who you are when you feel that you are comfortable, instead of always having a secret,
Yeah.
right?
My personal story happens to be a really visible one. I have two children. Um, their school, their boys and girls club, and all of the mothers of their friends have seen very actively have seen me transition. So I've gotten to a point of I don't give an F. That's like very, very high. I've recently picked up my daughter at Boys and Girls Club, and I'm standing next to my daughter, and she's playing with a friend, and the friend is looking at me, and my daughter, who is 11, casually says, "Oh yeah, my dad used to be a guy. Now she's transitioned and she's a woman." And then she says, "Okay, bye." And we walked away. And I thought, you just laid a bomb on that girl. She's going to process that for a while. But it's become really, really blasé. I wanted to. I don't know if we have time for this because it might be a little volatile, but it occurs to me. I want to hear your opinions about this topic, which is, it seems to me that there was a time, I'm talking about feminism and I'm also talking about violence against women. There seems to be a time in our culture, and I'm guessing in the 70s, when it suddenly became okay for a woman to make more money than her man. And so she would take a lot of pride in the fact that she's earning more money than her man. But at the same time, in that time and space, it was not okay. It was certainly not okay for the man to earn less money than his woman. And so while the woman was finding a certain safety and freedom, the man was being stigmatized and pushed down. And it seems to me that we're arriving kind of a similar paradigm. Oh my gosh, somebody has a feedback going on in their phone, and it's loud, 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 loud in my ears. Um, it occurs to me that we're in thank you, in a very similar space in terms of trans women are finally allowed to date cishet men, but cishet men are not allowed to date trans women culturally, and I think that it creates a conflict because we're getting emboldened and we're naturally dating. I'm on OkCupid, and then men are experiencing stigmatization from their peers, and uh, they're driven to all kind of weird reactions because of that. Do you think that there's any weight to my theory?
Let me add something. Another thing that is kind of unique to Black women in this country, we did not have the privilege of not working. Slavery, we have been working and providing for our families. When we went into sharecropper, the realm of sharecropper, we had to work the land. We had to work and go do seamstressing. We had to work and watch white people's families' children or clean their homes. We were never privileged enough to sit at home and let our man make all the money. We would, if Black women was not working and supplementing the man's income to survive. So we didn't have a culture that was the man makes the money, and when that in our family unit, it was because we was trying to mimic the higher white culture was the thing to do. So our culture has been as quiet as it's kept, even though there is patriarchy within our culture. When it comes to money, Rock as a unit structures in regards to money. So it's always a big mama in everybody's family. It's something to say in regard to the home. So I don't come from me, and I'm just talking about from my personal experience.
But I
I
was
don't
using
come
that
from
as
a
a
family.
parallel to make the real point, which is there seems to be a moment in time now that men are being stigmatized for the notion of them potentially dating a trans woman. At one point, I actually overheard one salesman deride another salesman near me, and this is a few years back, and I was still presenting mail at the time. This is about 6 years ago. One man had said that he's met a beautiful woman and that he started dating her, and the other one, as a joke, as a put down, said, "Oh, is she pre-op or post-op?" And it was intended as a barb. It was intended as a put down. So I think that that stigmatization of the man, that a man can't walk tall into a room and saying, "This is my girlfriend and she's trans." I think that's a really big issue in terms of toxic masculinity in our society.
I agree. I think that that's an issue that is maybe too big for our plate because that's a generational ingrained thing with the machismo, the hypermasculine male that we were talking about earlier, the religious aspect of how men are seen. A woman has more freedom somewhat to be. It's really weird. Women have more freedom to be somewhat sexual. They can be bi or lesbian, and it's not seen as much as an affront as a gay man is, or a trans man is, or if they're dating a trans woman. So that's just I often struggle with that. How do you bridge that gap? How does that start?
And Carmarian, I think,
We
has a
got
point to that.
to nuance that a little bit, Vanessa. We got a little nuance that a little bit. Women have more fluidity when when it's from the male gaze. Like, it's okay for you to be a lesbian if we can participate in it. Like, it's okay for them to be when I say we, I'm talking about like as a man, not us as in trans women, but the higher a says it's okay for women to be lesbians if we can watch, if we can participate, if you are doing it for us. It is
Mm-hmm.
not okay for you to be a lesbian and be fluid as a woman if you are not allowing us to participate or allowing us to gauge it. Be a problem.
And that's my point. There is an allowance, even when you're still being subjugated. You're still a
Yeah.
woman. You can't be too sexual. But if you're doing it for us, then you can be sexual. As on the other hand,
Yeah, female sexuality is more free range, and
male to
male
female
sexuality is more
transsexual.
caged.
Right.
But then
On the
on the
other
male
hand, there is
side,
not that allowance for the male.
I think
but then
Carmarian's
on the
been
male side,
holding
there
a
is an
point. I'd like to
allowance
give
for
Carmarian a
freedom
chance to say it.
for multiple people.
Say it again.
I think
On the
Carmarian had a
male
point.
side,
Okay.
there's a freedom to have sex with multiple people and be okay with not being committed. It's like okay for you to be like a hoe because you're not really called a hoe as a male. You're called a play. You kind of praise for it. So there is a level of freedom on that side
True.
that
Yeah.
once
But not in the relationship between same-sex couples is what I think I was referring to.
Mm-hmm. And hold on, gals. I want to make sure to give Carmarian the floor because I think she has been holding a thought.
Well, I was trying to soak things in, and I think one of the things that we have to look at is that trans women are sexualized. We are we are a fetish to communities. The porno videos illustrate us that way, so we're not taken serious. So us trying to have this binary type of connection with a cisgender male, or in this particular conversation, we are still breaking the monotony of society's views to us that's been ingrained in them. The challenge I have is it wasn't long ago that we legalized interracial marriages, and they said if it happened, we surely, we're going to destroy, the state, or we're all going to die. And guess what? We're still living. They said that, even with gay marriage and whatnot, and we're still thriving and we're still living. The challenge I have is that we're not afforded the same opportunity because what's been ingrained from society and what we have chosen to keep in the forefront of what we have agreed with without being open-minded to know that there's been a blueprint that's already been written. Back then, slave owners slept with their slaves. And guess what? We're still living. So all of these different types of changes, have come before us. But when it comes down to trans dating versus cis, it's like this, especially trans women, because it's what's been ingrained, and we're not, and I have to say we, because I live in a society, have not taken the opportunity to really understand that a trans woman is not a freak. We're not their unicorn, per se, sexually. We won't just do things that your cisgender girlfriend would not do. That is so played out. We are human beings, and the same way that you can attract others, you can get that same attraction from me. At the same time, let's talk about, again, as I said earlier, the system doesn't work for us. So if I do have to go out there and be a street connoisseur, what image is that giving not just me as an individual, but to my community? And then what is that allowing society's perception to say about my community? And then I fall in love with a cisgender guy, but he wants to keep it behind closed doors because he knows that the perception is not positive. So again, the formula of it is that what can we do to be in position as trans women to combat the perception, the negative perception that does not take us serious with our authentic love, especially when we're living out our authentic self. That's my response.
And we have to hold men to the fire. We have to let men know that this is their problem too. Like toxic masculinity kills them as well. The reason why Black men are feared is because of racism, and because they're also perpetuating this macho, evil, I'm a thug, I'm a gangster, I'm a real man type of mentality. It makes people fearful of you. So we have to hold the men of us.
I'm beginning to think that this is a ploy I'm beginning to think that this is a ploy that Diamond has of saying a really, really interesting point, and then when she gets the cliffhanger, then her phone freezes and we're wondering, what is it that she said? Are you back? All right, we're actually at 6:15 right now in California, and we have to come to the wrap up part of this session. I'm sure that you ladies have many places that you need to be, and I don't want to hold you up too long. I'm wondering if you could go around the room and just think of the fact that young Black trans women are watching this. what words would you like to impart as you leave? What would you like to leave them with? And let's start with Carmarian.
You know, if I can leave anything to this, to any trans person, if you're just now walking in your authenticity, not necessarily outwardly, but inwardly, I want to speak to the mental, I want to speak to the questions. The one biggest thing is that the way that you were created was created good and perfect in the sight of the creator and whatever you believe in. There is a gift that's locked up into you, and so that gift has to be unfolded by you living out your truth in order for you to be a blessing in this universe. So be who you are, be intentional, and be clear that you actually have a family of support. And if you don't know where they are at, Google us and we will point you to, and we will become your family. But know that you were perfectly and wonderfully made, and you're beautiful inside out, and no one else can change that, because guess what? They didn't create you. Something higher did. And because someone higher did, no one can take that away.
It's hard to follow that, right, Diamond?
And you are not alone.
Diamond, can you hear us? I'm going to give a second because I think she'll come back. Oh, there she is. Let's give her a second. Hello.
Am I back?
You're back.
Know that you are enough. Know that you are not alone. Know that you have the power, even in this dismal systems that oppress you. You have the power to create your own space of happiness. You have a right to it. Go out and grab it. And if you need some help, you got some sisters in Black Trans Women Inc. that will lead you and comfort you and console you, and that loves you, and that you are welcome to come and fellowship with us. You can hit us up on Facebook. You can hit us up wherever. We are open to be your friend, and know that you can come and fellowship with us, and you have a home with us. That's it.
Wonderful. Okay, and let's see if we can get Vanessa on. I think that Vanessa's been muted. We need to make sure to unmute her phone. Do we know how to do that? Yeah, she's mute right now. I'm not sure how to bring her back. There we go. Hello, Vanessa.
Oh, the shade. Who muted me? Well, I want to say that the one thing that has been really helpful for me in my navigation through the world in my 39 years is that having a group of people that are honest and trustworthy, that can give me honest pointers in surviving this game, this life that we're living as trans women. I think that's so important. I've had friends, great friends like Diamond and Deja and Melissa. We've all had our ups and downs, but there's always been a certain level of honesty where when it's time to be real, I can rely on their word. And that has been so monumental in my life. So for the girls coming up that are struggling and trying to figure things out, try to find that honest person that knows what they're talking about, that can help you. And if you don't have that, try to be that person. Try to be that person for the people that are around you. Try to help them and just be honest with your struggle.
I really like that. Yes, if you don't find anybody being inspirational, perhaps it's your time to step up and become the inspiration.
Correct.
All right. Well, I think that we need to bring this to a conclusion. I really, really appreciate the fact that you all showed up and lent your voices to the summit. I feel really honored by the fact that you allowed me in the room, and we had this really wonderful conversation. And I'm hoping that there's going to be more of these. I'm hoping that this is going to be the beginning of more conversations. And with that, I'm going to bring this to an end. I'm going to hit stop broadcast. This was another session of the Empowered Trans Woman Summit.
Bye.